Thank you. It's it's nice to be with you all. I'm seeing here various small pictures of people I've known for a good while, and Michael and I hope to be useful to you in two ways. We want to share some thoughts with you, but we also want to hear yours and respond to questions and so on. It will be instantly obvious to all of you, I hope, that we don't know squat about online learning. And we're not curriculum experts and all that stuff that you've doubtless been helping your faculties to cope with isn't, our wheelhouse. We wanted to do this to have a chance to reflect with people about the experience of being in the leader's shoes and the leader's position during such an unprecedented crisis. I know that some of you were heads already at 9/11. Others of you were heads already in the financial meltdown in 2008. And many others of you who weren't yet running schools were at least working in schools during those times. And to me, at least, this sort of feels like the worst of both of them in some respects. They were both awful, and they were unpredictable, and there was lots of upset and literally terror and so on. But there are a number of ways in which this seems just sort of well beyond it. For those of you who are anywhere near the metropolitan area in New York and city, it may feel even more that way. We also know that some of you come from large schools and some from small, and some from schools that are well resourced and others from schools that are not. I don't know if we have any boarding folks with us, though I know you have some in the association. But we're going to try to focus on leadership things that we hope will cut across schools. But we will be very glad to answer questions. And if we don't get to something in this hour that's particularly important or relevant to you, we will be glad to have you email us and we get back to you. I'm Rob Evans at Verizon.net. And Michael, you are?
Michael Thompson.Ph.D. at gmail.com. So Michael Thompson, all one word, .Ph.D. at gmail.com.
So a couple more thoughts, and then Michael's going to sort of lead into the first piece of substance. Michael and I have for a long time been interested in the border of the professional and the personal in the lives of school leaders. That is not just in the kind of skill set that you need to be able to apply to lead a school, but also sort of the personal part of doing that and what it requires of you. And also actually at times what it gives you back. And this seemed a time when that border is likely to be more relevant than ever, because it's such a challenging time to be a leader. The whole school world in some ways feels to me like it's being stood on its head. A couple of days ago, I was speaking to the dean of students at a boarding school in New England, and he said, in March, the seniors hate us and we hate them. And they can't wait to get out, and we can't wait to get rid of them, he said. It's just awful. In fact, at our school, we've started sending them out on internships and other things just to get them out of here. He was joking a little. And he said, but now, as they were finishing up and the kids were leaving, they were all saying, oh my God, what about prom? Oh my God, what about graduation? And we, he said, are thinking, well, he said, actually, I'd be glad to get rid of the prom, but I know it's important to them. And the graduation is meaningful to everybody. And it feels like they were both kind of remade aware of how important the school is to everyone, and also of what kind of loss is likely to come with it here. And we, though it may feel like, to me it does, a couple of weeks already feels like a long time, it looks like we got a long time stretching out in front of us. Michael and I have been hearing about schools that are grappling about whether they're going to go pass fail, if they have to be out for weeks to come, and what would be involved in that. Lots of questions about how to manage the learning, what to do about kids who have special learning differences and all sorts of things. Anyway, but through it all, there's the challenge of what it's like to be in your shoes leading the folks. And we'd love to share a couple of thoughts with you about that and then hear yours back. So, Michael?
Thank you, Rob. All of us are dealing with a really potent mixture of helplessness and uncertainty and fear, fear of dying, fear of being in the high risk category, and also grief because we're losing something. I'm the supervising psychologist at Belmont Hill School, and the head there has been talking to me about how sad he is for the seniors and how sad he is about the events that it has to cancel. And the problem is we don't know how long this fear is going to last, how long this grief is going to last, whether we'll get to feel more or less helpless as time goes on. This package of uncertainty is quite unique in Rob's and my consulting to schools. 9/11, though terrifying, was an incident that happened and then we reacted to. 2008 stretched out in front of us with very scary implications. But in any case, when you're in a leadership position, what we believe is that everybody's watching you to see how you filter all of this feeling. How do you metabolize it? How does she handle the things that are scaring the hell out of us? So when the Wall Street collapsed in 2008, I had a call from a head of a boarding school in New York State, and he said that there were parents asking him to write a letter reassuring them about the economic situation. And he called me and said, look, I'm a head of school. What do I know? I'm a layman. I only know what I read in the papers. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't, but my parents want me to write. And actually, some people on my board want me to write and be the authority. So why does that happen? It happens because for many of our parents, you are the most meaningful leader in their lives. There was a day when people would have called their minister or their priest or their rabbi. They might have called the mayor of their small town, maybe. Nobody's going to call their doctor now because you know your doctor is overwhelmed. But when it comes to children, you are not only just their head of school. You may be the leader of their emotional community, and the people they think of their peers. You may be the most important authority in their lives. They may never have articulated that to themselves, but they will find themselves looking to you and looking with some transference, as we talk about in our trade, as really the adult in the room. And what they're going to be looking to you to do is to show them how you're processing your own fear, your own uncertainty, your own helplessness. When we're young and we're frightened, we look to adults. We look to our moms, we look to our dads. When we're really upset, and you find this all the time now, I mean, it's always been true of kids and their parents. When a child gets very anxious, she runs to her mom and she throws the anxiety into her mom. She just projects it into her mom, all these fears. And then she watches what her mother does with it. And we know, because we've seen this played out many times, when a parent can absorb the anxiety, acknowledge the anxiety, bear the anxiety, and remain calm, honest. Yes, that's scary, sweetie, but calm. The child settles down. I believe that there are many, many people in your community who will at one time or another want to throw their fears into you. Some of your teachers, some of your staff, and some of your parents. And what they'll want to see is that you are able to process it. Well, hello, none of us have done this before. I mean, I'm reading all the time. This is the worst pandemic in 100 years, since the 1918. I've in my own mind going back to being a student at a boarding school during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and my fears of being away from my parents, and even going back to the polio epidemic, and remembering lining up a collegiate school for boys when I was 8 years old to get the Salk vaccine shot, which I did. And I'm reaching back in my own past to say, have I done something like this before? Is there, what reference points do I have in my own life? And the answer is that I've got some reference points, but they're not accurate for this. They don't cover this. We're all facing a situation which is new to us and scary to us. I'm doing it just for myself. I don't have to do it for a community, but all of you have to do it for a community. So what does it ask of you? It asks that you reach down and find levels of courage in yourself that you may not know you had. But to me, that's just an extension of what it means to be a school leader. I wrote a piece some years ago in Independent School Magazine called Courageous Headship. And I wrote it with Rick Melvoin, then head at Belmont Hill, after he and I had gone through the deaths of some kids and a suicide, which had rocked us. And we were talking about how much courage the job requires and how much people look towards a school leader for a display of courage. Does this mean machismo? Does this mean, bravado? No, nothing of the kind. It's just that people are watching you to see that you've reached into yourself and that you're finding reserves of courage. And they will then experience that as inspiring, steadying. So what is courage? When I was writing this paper, I went to a lot of writers to look for how people define courage, because I was realizing in my school consulting that I was seeing administrators and heads of school that I admired enormously. And technically proficient people I didn't admire in quite the same way. And I was trying to sort out in my mind what it was about them that was commanding my respect. And it was this quality of courage. So I was reading, what is it? What is it? So I could write about it. And the definition I came up with was, and love so much, it comes from Eleanor Roosevelt, who, as you know, started off as a timid, shy, homely girl who married this cousin who was this commanding presence, and she felt nothing like his equal. And she grew to be one of the most extraordinarily important and courageous women in her day, known around the world, admired around the world. And this was her definition, Eleanor Roosevelt's definition of courage. She said, you gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. That's why I think the head of school's job is a lot about growing your own courage. And nobody asked for this, nobody wanted it, but all of you are going to grow in courage. And because you grow in courage, and because your community can see that, they will also be more courageous. They will be steadier because you are steadier. And that means you have to take care of yourself. That means you have to go to the people who comfort you if you can get to them, one way or another. But I believe that there are lots of people looking towards you. And now Rob's going to talk about the way in which, in a sense, you can manifest your courage.
Thanks, Michael. So I got 3 C's and an E to add here to the C for courage. So at times like this, whether it was 9/11 or 2008, or when there have been other crises just within your school, perhaps, but certainly with this, what we all face is a terrible loss of continuity. It's like there's a rip in the fabric of our lives and of the school community and so on. And one of the most helpful things that leaders can do is to provide, for you to literally provide a link, a continuity. And, you know, back at 9/11 and again in 2008, I met tons of heads of school who rediscovered how important they were, and sometimes simply by showing up. There's something important symbolically about your position and you in that role. And it can be a burden because people always see you as being in the role, but you are essentially the priest in the secular parish, even if your school has no religious affiliation whatsoever. And people see you as the embodiment of the covenant of our school community. And so for you to simply stay in touch with your people is, which I know you all have been doing and will do, is actually not to be dismissed as unimportant. On the contrary, I think it makes a real difference. I was listening in on another call yesterday at another school where I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now. And the head was, it was a very small school, was asking each person on the screen, as you could see, how are you? Is your family okay? Is anybody ill? That kind of stuff. You could see faces light up. People were very grateful, literally, just to be asked, you know? And the second reason why the continuity is important between you and them is that one of the ways you strengthen the school vis-a-vis the families during this time when their kids aren't getting to come to you and they're having to deal with them at home and they're going to have to manage the online learning part and da-da-da-da-da, is to be able to encourage your teachers and your advisors and so on to be in touch with the families. Michael and I live in suburbs outside Boston, and they're suburbs which have very, very good public schools. And if you do what we each did, which is to choose an independent school for your children, in our case, you were not buying better instruction. What you were buying was a different context for good instruction. Smaller classes, smaller pupil loads, smaller school, greater sense of community, more connection, greater chance for relationship between student and teacher and student and student. And I think in the face of this crisis, one of the things that's likely to be helpful, because it has been in past crises, is to make sure that your teachers, or depending on your school, the advisor, whoever it is, that there's a way for them to make contact, not just with the kids, but a contact with the parents. In the couple of schools I know where they've already been doing that, the response has been very enthusiastic. So they haven't just sent general things home from school and so on. So there's that. Three other things, all small, all simple, not always easy, none of them fancy, none of them different from what you have often done, but likely to remain important here. One is candor. One of the ways you show you're courageous is by being candid. Now, there are times when you can't be fully candid. So here's an example. We've already talked with a couple of people who are from very small schools and are literally worried that their school may go under. And they have had faculty ask them, am I going to get a contract for next year? And the honest answer is they don't know. And the board hasn't been able to decide yet. And they don't know what the future is going to bring and what the enrollment's actually going to be like. And there are parts of that in some cases, they don't want to say altogether, but it makes a difference to be able to say whatever you can say as candidly as possible, because people love the genuineness and it gives them some confidence, even when the news is uncertain. And you may have to say, we don't know yet. Our goal is to keep the school as strong as we can. and to be doing everything next year that we're doing this year. But as of this moment, I don't actually know. We have a lot ahead of us. I'm going to stay in touch with you. I'll be glad to tell you everything I can as soon as I can. Something like that is a way of cutting through anxiety for a number of people, even when the news itself is not altogether encouraging. But the fact that you dealt with them in that way radiates confidence. What comes along with that is clarity. And by clarity here, I think it's important for you to be able to be clear with your folks about what's negotiable and what is not. This is also something that's always good to do. But for example, there may be some questions. Lots of faculty have been reported in many schools as being very nervous about doing the online learning. For example, nervous about being criticized by parents or what have you, or whatever. Or having concerns that things I really need to cover in my 11th grade honors history course, I'm not going to be able to do, et cetera, and whatnot. It's helpful for people to know what's negotiable and what's, here's what we're all doing, and everybody's going to do this. There's small advantages that occur in crises like this. One of them is that even the most obstreperous faculty are often very grateful to be told what to do for a brief period of time. And you should seize the opportunity, right? Because some of those people are not nearly as confident underneath as they sound when they're bloviating in faculty meetings. So it can be helpful. I see some of you smiling, so I know you have some of these folks. Michael and I know this. Independent schools aren't just independent as institutions. They're full of independent people, you know? But right now, some of those independent people need to know, here's what we're doing. Now, there may be some things where you're saying, here's what we're going to do, and I'm telling you how to do it. Or here's what we're going to do, and we're going to discuss how to do it, right? So it's not like you have to be a dictator, but it's very important if there are things that you know in your bones make sense and you need the school to be presenting a common front or doing things in a similar way, this is a good time to be really clear about what's up for grabs and what isn't. And the last thing, you know, which is also not new to you, is empathy. Michael made a reference, and that is true. He and I have seen for years that there is a transference factor. You are essentially everybody's parent in the school, the students, the faculty, the staff, and for in many cases, the parents themselves. And for you to simply ask, to inquire, to radiate some concern, you know, often goes a very long way. Many school leaders that Michael and I have known have felt an obligation, if asked a question, that even a tough one, I have to answer it. You know, a lot of times you don't have to answer it. Michael talked about when a child goes to the parent, and he wasn't being condescending when he said that. That's what really actually happens. The person comes to you and says, you know, do you really think we're going to survive? And you may be doubtful. You can say, if you want, gee, you know, what were you thinking about? Or what makes you ask? Was there a concern you particularly had? And you listen, and for a couple of minutes, there's a little back and forth. And then you can say something simple. But what's happened in the couple of minutes is a reconnection. And what everybody's missing right now is connection, because we're all reduced to this. And so to the extent that you can provide that kind of empathic ear here and there, it's likely to go a long way.